first show on what's going to be a fantastic journey of BRL history through the eyes of not only the players, but you, the fans, journalists, referees, anyone we can come across who love the BRL pre-Broncos in 1988. We want a big response from you guys for the show, and just give us your ideas around what you want to see, who you want to hear from, what your great memories are. I'll cover more of the socials as we go through the show. My name's David Burke, and I want to join firstly Mike Simpson. How are you, Simo?
Good, mate. This is a long time coming, Berkey, but I'm pretty excited, mate, to be working with you and John. You know, we're all BRL fanatics, as we've all discussed off air, and we share the same passion. So I think it's a long time overdue, Berkey, as we discussed yesterday. And I think with the three of us, with our different scopes on the competition, on how it was pre-Broncos days, I think it's going to be a really interesting ride.
Absolutely, mate. How are you, John?
I'm good, thanks, Dave and Mike. Yeah, really happy to be here, and yeah, looking forward to rekindling a lot of old, very good memories of the Brisbane Rugby League comp in the pre-Broncos era, which is, as anyone who lived through that era knows, or grew up during that era, just how tribal and how passionate people were. People who didn't live through it don't realise just how big Brisbane Rugby League was back then, and all the characters and all the great teams and great players that were around in that comp.
Very good point, mate. I mean, as a kid, I've got to say, as a kid, my go-to in the 70s was Redcliffe. As a kid, I loved watching Redcliffe play. I thought their side of the 70s with Forrester Grayson, Tony Obbs, Peter Leese, may rest in peace, Ian Tiney, Bobby Jones, Steve Bullow, Colin Part, all those guys, Bunny Pearce, may he rest in peace. They were just a real go-to side for me. I loved watching them play. Probably in the 70s, early 80s, the 81 Heartbreak Grand Final, which we'll cover in future podcasts. They should have won far more premierships than what they did. So they were just sadly a really great side out of luck in a number of grand finals, particularly the West one, I think, in 75, 26, 24. It's another podcast that we'll have a couple of special guests in the future coming up on. But those real heartbreak losses really gravitated me as a kid growing up and watching those great players run around. What about you, Simo? What's your sort of memories growing up as a kid of the BRL, buddy?
East tragic, mate. I'm an East Tiger. Don't be fooled by the Logan City jersey. Shirt. Everyone's got a second team, and I'll cover that as we progress in future episodes. But Logan City was my second team. But the answer to your question, mate, East Tigers tragic. 1980, first game, Dad took me down to Langlands Park. That was against the Magpies. And as you can imagine, like a starry-eyed little kid, you know, some of those legends running around, you know, it was just an amazing, as John was saying, it's amazing tribal warfare that these clubs had back in that era. So I took it one step further. I pestered the officials there, wanting to run the sand out as a sand boy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they had a sand pit there near the old Cam bar, and it was this big sand pit, and it had a golden circle tin that you used to get the sand in, run out to the players. So it was a big thing for those kids back then to run out. But I've been an East Tigers fan, mate, since then, since 1980. It hasn't changed. I've loved it. I mean, you were mentioning a lot of players. For me, it was, the Morris brothers, Johnny Lang, Brad Backer, Steve Stacey. It was just, an amazing time in BRL history.
Well, I'll tell you what, Simo, one of the main goals of this show is to obviously try and track some of those legends down you mentioned. Johnny Lang, Rod Morris, first State of Origin games. So that's what this show's about, is trying to track down those guys, really dive into their history growing up, where they started from, basically. From this show, we really want to dive into how these players came to Brisbane, where they grew up as a kid, what made them go to the BRL. So all those sorts of things we really want to dive in here as a collective and really unearth some of the things that drove those players to the greatness. What about you, Johnny?
Well, I grew up on the north side of Brisbane, Dave, and as you can probably tell, you may be able to tell from the jersey, it's a little bit battered now. It's an old Brothers jersey, and I was a Mad Keen Brothers supporter. So
love it.
you know, my memories of those days, basically, you know, the good old-fashioned going to the football and watching 3 grades of football, you know, C grade, reserve grade, and A grade for your club. Every second week it was at, you know, for brothers, obviously they were playing out at Corbett Park, which sadly doesn't exist anymore, but and then going to all the other grounds that were around the place, like Bishop Park and Newman Oval, another one that doesn't exist anymore, Perth Park, Dolphin Oval, Cougar Eye, you name it, and also at Lang Park when they were playing the match of the day, you know, you'd head to Lang Park as well. So just heading to all those sorts of games, you know, as a kid, as I was a kid in the 70s and brothers were sort of there or thereabouts, you know. But finally, we cracked it in '87. Probably my happiest memory was in '87 when brothers got the last of the pre-Broncos BRL premierships in '87. So I finally got to see them do it. And sadly, brothers as a senior club is no more. But you know, in the Brisbane Premiership. But you know, those are the sorts of things that I really like doing. And even just simple things when you were a kid back in those days, which you probably can't do at the big games these days and the big professional games, that, you know, you'd go onto the ground at half time and football around and have a scratch match against, you know, whoever was around and that sort of thing. And those games were intense for 10 minutes and you'd go back, hop back over the fence and then watch the rest of the game, you know. And all those sorts of things were just a great experience. Going on the field and getting autographs of blokes after the game and that sort of thing was, you know, was just something you raced on it and did and that sort of thing. And you were that close to them all the time. So those sort of things were my best, happiest memories as a kid. And in terms of brothers players, you know, in the 70s, there was blokes like Ian Douth and David Wright and those sort of guys. And then
legends.
As brothers got stronger in the 80s and that sort of thing, you had guys like Trevor Bailey and Tony Ray and those sort of blokes that sort of broke the drought for brothers and got them that premiership in '87, which was fantastic.
What you raised a good point, Johnny, in that games then were literally a day out. It would start at C grade at midday and go right through to A grade. So a lot of the families would get there, and as Mike said, it became very tribal, but it was a great day out. I mean, having played in the BRL myself, I mean, starting out at C grade, it was just a wonderful experience to get there, play your C grade game, get showered, get changed, get with your C grade mates in the beer can or wherever, watch the reserve grades play, then the A grade, and you learn so much from a club camaraderie. And the other big thing, guys, then that you don't see these days was how important the club championship was to sides. The club championship points were always at the back of the big league program, how it was going the club championship race. And you took great pride if your club could win that club championship. What are your thoughts on that, Simo? They were really exciting times from that perspective.
They were, mate. And as a program collector, and you know, collecting that memorabilia, they were the sort of things that on the game day that you love to go and have a look. You love to peruse who was playing, who was out, the club championship, the premiership ladder, all of that sort of stuff was a one-stop shop in that program. And sadly, these days, because of technology, they don't have the game day program anymore. So it's actually a bugbear with a lot of well, I wouldn't say dinosaurs, but a lot of the older folk who followed, you know, the BRL, that they loved the program. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was a really good statistical amount of information that you could derive from that, just from that one publication. And as you said, Berkey, it was very, very pivotal in the competition.
Without a doubt. And I mean, I was watching some old YouTube videos through the week of the BRL, and what I forgot about was there used to be a match of the day on a Saturday and a Sunday at Lang Park. The Saturday game was usually played at, and I sort of forgot all about that till I saw, I think, a West Redcliffe game from 77 or 78, and it was a Saturday afternoon game at the old Lang Park. It was a dust bowl in winter. Yeah. But I then remembered, they had a Saturday match of the day and then a Sunday match of the day at Lang Park, which was just awesome for a kid. I think both games used to be replayed 6 p.m. Sunday and Saturday nights, only on the ABC. And the good thing about that, there were no ads.
Yes. Perfect. Yeah.
Correct.
Some of the commentators too, Dave. I remember blokes like George Doniger and Mick Vevers and those sort of guys that used to do the commentary on the TV, which was, fantastic. Billy J. Smith,
rest in peace.
John McCoy on the radio and that sort of thing. It was some of those guys were as big as the game itself, almost, in terms of the way. Fonda Matassa was another one I remember.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think the ABC commentator was Arthur Donovan. I don't know if
Yeah,
Arthur's still alive.
Yep.
But,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but he was the ABC commentator with David Wright predominantly.
Yep.
But yeah, I actually forgot they used to play Saturday afternoon games at the Old Lang Park, which was just brilliant.
The other thing, Berkey, was and John was people tend to forget the midweek games.
Yeah.
Wednesday night. How many times I used to go there? There'd be like 500 people there in attendance, but you went there to support the competition, and those are players really appreciated the fans coming out, even though it was only a handful of players. But people tend to forget that these guys were working jobs as well, playing on a Wednesday night, having to back up to go to work the next day. Then, as you said, Berkey, playing on the weekend as well. So
yeah,
there was a lot of games played back then.
And Simo, you hit a good point. I think what we're trying to get out of the guys is they back then were paid peanuts. Let's be honest. They have to work jobs, 1 job, 2 jobs. Some work 3 jobs.
Yes.
Up at 4, 5 o'clock as a concreter or a brewery driver or something like that. Work till 3, home for an hour and a half kip. Then they'd go back to training from maybe 5:30 till 8:30. It was a hard gig being a BRL player, A grade, reserve grade, or C grade back then. And those guys really earned their keep. So that sort of stuff's exciting me, trying to drag out how they manage that. I mean, players these days don't do it. Let's be honest. They're full-time, big coin. But those guys back then really had to earn their keep. What are your thoughts, Johnny? It was a hard gig for them, wasn't it?
Definitely was. As I said, it was, you played as much for the love of the game. I don't think you played for money. I think everyone that was in the game then was in it for the love of the game. And anything they earned on the top was a bit of gravy, basically. So yeah, you've got to respect that. And it'd be interesting to know their thoughts on what the players get paid today, because, as I said, it's certainly a different world. But who knows, maybe it made them better rounded characters overall, It's just, but it certainly would have been, they wouldn't have had much spare time, put it that way, in between working, playing football and fulfilling their family commitments and whatnot, yeah.
So, guys, I mean, why are we making the show? Simo, from your perspective, and I mean, you're, one of the most respected guys in Brisbane with your memorabilia and some of the awesome blogs you write on Facebook. From your perspective, Mike, why are we making this show? I mean, what's driving us to do so?
I think, and this is no disrespect to the Broncos, but I think after the Broncos came into the competition, the old BRL as we knew it, and let's all be honest, it is a shadow of its former self. Yes, it's slowly getting back now, in the Intrust Super Cup with ratings and what have you. But back in those days, as you said, Berkey, we were the second best competition in Australia. We had the cream of the crop. And I have touched on this with both of you guys for a lot of conversations that we've had, that I believe a lot of these guys have been forgotten about.
Yep.
And I believe a lot of these clubs have been forgotten about. Brothers.
Yeah.
In particular, Logan City.
Yep.
I write these articles, and the feedback that I always get is thanks for writing that, thanks for the memories. And as the comments start cascading down, it'll be, you and John might have played together, Berkey, so you used to rekindle a friendship, So it's all about bringing back the community, bringing back the memories, bringing back the players, and reliving some of that stuff. Yeah. Because I think it's vital that we never ever lose that.
Yeah.
It was such a big thing, and you touched on the memorabilia, and that's just a subsidiary thing that I do to keep the memories alive, as well as to preserve that history, because we don't have anything like that in Brisbane or Queensland for that matter. We have nothing.
It's a shame, isn't it?
So it's really relied heavily on people like myself, and there's other people out in the community as well who do collect as well. So yeah, just to get back to your question, mate, it's basically just to keep the memories alive and to ensure that that what we're doing is bringing these players back together, and showing this generation what these guys were. That they were like, let's be honest, they were like gods to us.
They were kings.
They were. That's and you know the title of the show is
When they were
perfect.
Kings.
When they were Kings, because they were.
And if I can throw to John a bit, and before I bring John in on that, it was an article that John wrote. And if you want to see that article, guys, you can go to the website at whentheywerekings.com.au for some wonderful articles Mike and John have written. But it was a particular article that John wrote probably 4 years ago, I think, John, maybe 5, called When They Were Kings. And it was a fantastic synopsis of what Mike just said on about how the passion of the BRL just was their everyday life for a lot of people, whether you lived at Nunda, Woodridge, Redcliffe, Ipswich. There was always that passion. And the article John wrote really created a nerve, John, and some of the comments you had from people were quite amazing, to be honest with you. And that was the real article, and that's hence the name of the show, When They Were Kings, was what your blog post was called. You got sort of similar feelings to Mike around why we're doing this?
Yeah, very much so, Dave. I was just sitting around one night feeling nostalgic, you know, and that's when I wrote that article, basically. And I threw it up online thinking, oh, well, you know, you're happy if you know, a few hundred people read it or whatever. But there were thousands of people that read it, you know. I was blown away. And then I thought, well, this is just really not only a great memory for me, it's a great memory for a lot of people, you know. And as I said, it's not talked about a lot, and it's something that's unfortunately, with the passage of time, people have long, you know, a lot of people have forgotten about. But it's a great time in Brisbane's history, and a bit like Mike, a lot of these guys need to be celebrated for the heroes that they were, basically. So I wrote that article just sort of saying the way I felt about it, and the feedback that I got, and then the you know the amount of people that read it and commented on it, and were, you know, I you know, threw out names of players that I mentioned, and then people just, you know, it just, you know,
snowballed.
Basically, it's snowball. People saying, what about this guy? What about that guy? And you think, well, gee, this is such a special memory for so many people, and that, you know, so many people would love to hear from these guys about their thoughts about their own playing days, what they think about the game today, how things have progressed for them beyond those 70s and 80s days when we used to watch them on the ABC. I think they should be celebrated, like Mike said.
Really good point. I mean, from my perspective, I was very lucky to play in the BRL. I played with South from 83 through to 86, a member of their 85 premiership side. I went to Valleys in 87 through to 92. I had a year at the Broncos in 88. So from my perspective, and luckily enough to win 2 premierships at Valleys, 89, 90. So through my eyes, you could feel how important the BRL was from history. Being a part of it, there was no doubt about it. We were the second best comp in the world. And I'm sort of hoping, from what I've experienced, I can bring some of that type of passion with games that we played and what players think during the BRL, and some of the grounds we played at and the dressing rooms we went into and the abuse we copped. You know, we can share that through here. Yeah, and as you rightly said, John and Mike, is that these players we're going to talk to have such an amazing, rich history. And why we want to explore that is, as you guys know, when they were interviewed on, let's maybe remember the old sports scene show on a Sunday with Franco Callahan and those guys. Peter Mears was the chair. Yeah. We only ever got like a 2 or 3 minute snip of them, like game day, but we've never really, as I said at the start, paired back to how they got to where they were that had such great careers in the BRL. So we really want to drive that pre-BRL, what drove them to be a great player, what their pre-game rituals were, what they liked, what they hated, who they didn't like playing against. So they're the sort of areas that I hope as a player we can really draw out of them and have some really good conversation around what made them the person they are when they're in the BRL.
Absolutely.
You know. Simo, I want to touch base with your brother on some of the paraphernalia behind you, mate. Over your right shoulder, that number 4 Wynnum Century jersey. What is that, buddy?
So that one there is Gene Miles's jersey from 1984.
For real?
And fun
That's
fact,
a premiership side.
Yes.
Yeah.
They played at the end of the season. They played Auckland. They went over to Auckland, and Tia Rapati, who played for the New Zealand Warriors and St Helens, swapped jerseys with Gene. And excuse me, he knows that I collect the memorabilia. And one day he just said, I found this jersey in my cupboard. This was Gene Miles that I swapped with him back in 1984. Gene knows that I've got it. I'm actually seeing Gene tomorrow to have it signed by him.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that jersey, like John's article that he wrote, the amount of people that commented on that jersey was phenomenal. It was like it went down a meltdown. It was awesome. Because Wynnum had such a fanatical support base, as you know. So to them, that's like a holy grail.
That's gold. That is absolute gold. Guys, if you want to see that jersey in more detail, you can go to our website, as I said, whentheywerekings.com.au, or click on our Facebook page, When They Were Kings. So just type in Facebook search bar, When They Were Kings. Mike's going to be kind enough to have some photos of some of his memorabilia up on our Facebook page for you guys to have a look at, comment, ask Mike any questions around what you're seeing here tonight about some of the stuff he has, which is probably close to one of the prime collections of BRL memorabilia in Queensland, guys. So have a look and let us know what you think. Guys, getting close to wrap up, but what I want to talk about now is our first 5 guests. So, big moment for us. So the first 5 guests we've got coming up are Alan Curry, Marty Scanlon, Colin Scott, Normie Carr, and the great Campbell Zulu Juice. So, guys, where do you start with that 5? Simo, talk to me about those 5 players, mate, or one of them, whatever you want to go for.
I mean, where do you start? I mean, you can't just pick one, Berkey. I mean, if you're talking about those 5, they all played a key role in the former competition, the old BRL.
Yeah.
I personally am very excited for Campbell Zulu.
Nice. Yep. He's
a
real enigma.
Just because he was a cult figure, and for me, it was more the 80s for me that sort of rocked my boat. And I'm very excited to have Zulu on there. We've spoken on the phone prior to this going live.
Tell us about that conversation. Is he excited to be on?
He's very excited to be on, and he actually said, he's a gentle giant, but he actually said putting his name with those other 4 players was more than anything to him. He said to be held in the same esteem as those guys, he was very, very honoured, and he was very down to earth. And I think both of you guys will agree that he will probably be one of the most popular guests that we have on the show, only because of his just no holes barred, no respect for his body. If you're a Norths fan, you knew who Campbell Zulu Jews was, and for me personally, he's one that I'm really looking forward to speaking to.
Fantastic! Can't wait for him to be on the Big Zulu. What about you, Johnny?
I think any of those 5 guys, I'm looking forward to all 5. But certainly Zulu was a character, but all those guys had great careers. I mean, Alan Curry, I remember how hard he used to run. Norm Carr, as I said, was a member of the first Origin side. A Brisbane-based player that got a spot on the bench in the first Origin side. Colin Scott, obviously a test fullback that made it from Brisbane, from Wynnum, I just think Marty Scanlon. I was very, very young when Marty Scanlon was in his heyday, but I do remember Valley sides of those early 70s and how many premierships they won and that sort of thing. And he had an absolutely fantastic career. And I think he may have a similar amount of memorabilia or Valley's memorabilia, at least anyway, to Mike. So
he does.
Certainly a very interesting character to talk about and that sort of thing. And he's probably one of my earliest memories of the BRL competition, because Valley's was such a strong side when I was a kid and first started following it, So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, growing up, watching Alan Curry play in the 70s, I'm surprised he didn't kill someone the way that he would tackle. He was a kamikaze rocket. 77 Rothmans medalist. They don't give Rothmans medals out willy-nilly. You've got to earn that respect. So that's going to be a great thrill, I think, for us. I was lucky enough to play with Normie Carr when he moved from Western 84 to South 85. And at the time, guys, him moving from West to South was big news. Because he'd been the mainstay with West for 10 years. He'd won a couple of premierships as captain. So that transition from West to South, 84 through to 85, win a comp, big news back then. So I've spoken to Norm, and he's very, very excited to be joining us to go through that transition period from West to South. when you talk Marty Scanlon, a Valley's old boy I am, Marty's probably revered as probably the greatest Valley's player ever. And that's not spoken lightly around the halls of Newman Oval or Emerson Park these days. So Marty's esteem is peak as a Valley's legend. Scotty, our very first Origin fullback in 1980. So he's got a lot of DNA to share around what he went through, his transition from Townsville, which is where he came down from. And he really paved the way for a lot of Townsville guys, which I've spoken to Colin about already. And he's going to share some stories around some of the guys that followed him from Townsville to Brisbane and the names that they made. So, guys, it's a plethora of absolute legend status. And then the follow-on 5 we're going to have from that, we're going to talk about, I suppose the big question to keep everyone hanging is who's going to be the number 1 guest. So we'll talk about that now in our meeting between now and when we launch our first podcast.
Just one thing that I just want to touch on was we were talking about the tribal warfare and the fanaticism and stuff like that. And it's the one thing that I talk to a lot of blokes from our era that they miss was that grand final day, where if you were going through West End or you were going through the streets of Wynnum or down at Stones Corner at East, every shop was littered with streamers and balloons. And it was a great time. It was the best of times. And a lot of those guys miss that now. It just doesn't happen anymore because it just doesn't have that same that same feeling anymore, you know what I mean? So like we were saying, from 87 down, it was the best of times in Brisbane to watch rugby league.
Good point, mate. Johnny, anything to wrap up, mate, you want to add?
No, I couldn't agree more with Mike there. As I said, I'm just happy that I grew up in that era and got to experience that, basically. As I said, it's something that I often talk to my own kids about, and just sort of said, when you're taking them to see a Broncos game or a Cowboys game or whatever, you just want to say, look, it's, the standard of football is good and that sort of thing, but it's a different style of going to those suburban grounds and in that tribal era that we sort of grew up with, and it's almost like it's good to go and see an Intrust Super Cup game these days as well for the same reason. You're that close to the action, you see the hits, you feel the hits and that sort of thing. But it certainly was a different kettle of fish back in the 70s and 80s, because as I said that it was standing room only at a lot of these grounds pretty much at 3 o'clock or even before then. You're flat out getting a seat at Corbett Park or Bishop Park or wherever. You had to get there early to actually to get a seat, and you were parking streets and streets and streets away, just and happy to do it. So.
Yeah, good. Yeah, really good wrap, guys. I mean, just from my perspective, I'm just super excited with being able to, make contact with these guys, preserve that richness of history that each individual player brought into the BRL. So, look, I'm really excited for the journey, guys. And, for all you people out there, as I said, please hook us up on our website, whentheywere.kings.com.au, our Facebook page, When They Were Kings. Find us on YouTube, which is where a lot of our video blogs will go once we launch our first interviews over the next couple of weeks. Our YouTube channel is When They Were Kings. Get us on all the great podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts as well, guys. So we're there for your listening pleasure. Please fire any questions at us through the Facebook page. Our website will be up and running very, very shortly as well. So there'll be an area there to ask us any questions. We really value your support, guys. And we'll see you very, very soon for our first show. Bye for now.